keeping it going with the 42nd Super Sentai season in 2018, and that was, let's see if I can get this right, Kaito Sentai Lupinranger versus Ketsu Sentai Patranger. I would have done some other poses, but I needed a prop that looked like a gun, and the first one would have made sense if I had a cape, but whatever. Oh, but also, Patranger mask. I can hear the ocean in my right ear, but it's also, yeah, I want to use that Power Morphicon and even at AX actually, just to have something. But yeah, it's actually one of those Japanese masks you're supposed to wear it off at an angle. I don't know what it's called, but it's even here in the sticker, but there's too much glare. Sorry. Anyway, I should really see if they still have the Resoldier ones before they replace them with the new Lupinranger ones. Lupinranger versus Patranger, which I'm just going to abbreviate as Lupat, is actually, for one thing, in this journey thing that I did, is going to be the second time that I watched it. And it's also the first time I actually followed Super Sentai season as it was running. In all honesty, I don't really know why I started. I don't know why I started watching this season in 2018. I can't really remember why, but I'm glad I did. So just into the things that I liked and things that kind of threw me off. I guess while I briefly mentioned that this is the first Super Sentai season that I watched, as it was running, which would put it in 2018. Something funny about that is, so even though Persona 5 released in 2017, I purchased Persona 5 at December of 2017 because, the Christmas sales and whatnot. So in 2018, it just so happened that I was on this feeling and theme of the Phantom Thief, which also has the calling card and Arsene are references both Persona 5 and Lupinranger versus Patranger, because I'm pretty sure it's derived from a book, which I can't remember, but it was just kind of funny that Lupin and Arsene on my mind. And no, I haven't watched Lupin the Third, but I would imagine it's somehow related as well. I have no idea what the book goes into, so I don't imagine Lupinranger really pulled that much from it, other than just a couple of themes and references. But it almost made me that paired with Persona 5 almost makes me want to read the book, and maybe a few other books that were referenced. But anyway, so it's nothing new that Super Sentai draws a lot from Kamen Rider, and I think that's kind of evident in the power-ups. It's kind of a collectible season, but more so in the sense that each episode is focused on retrieving a collectible rather than having every power related to a collectible. But I think the power-up is heavily influenced by Kamen Rider in that when they really start getting into the beefier your weapons, it's not just an add-on on their main device. It manifests on their person, whether it's whether it's a giant armor shield chest piece thing, or if it's their entire arm. And it actually matches the theme of the device mecha that they use. I guess while I briefly brought up the fact that this is a different kind of collectible season, in that it's very centered around the Lupinrangers trying to locate different items or collection pieces to, unlock a power to make a wish. Kind of like Dragon Ball Z, in that they're always looking for the Dragon Balls, and so that they can, fulfill a wish. Except, it's more than just 7, more like 40, or a lot more pieces than that. We only see about 40, that's all. I really enjoyed the fact that the majority of the collection pieces that they used were old Super Sentai props. I don't know what prompted it. It's not like it was a major anniversary year. I think they just did it for fun, and it was fun. It took me a while to figure it out, because I didn't really notice it until this one episode, where it happens to resemble, like, the collection piece of that week happens to resemble like a gold and green bracelet that is famous from, like, a fairy tale. And then, a kid randomly comes across it, and apparently, according to that fairy tale or that story, it makes them run faster. And then, they want to use it for their own purpose, and the off chance that it'll work. I'm probably going too much into it already, but, when I saw that, I'm like, that is very clearly the Chronomorpher from Power Rangers Time Force, or, well, I didn't watch it at the time, so Power Rangers Time Force, or in this case, Time Ranger. So I was like, they just repainted that. But, it's not uncommon to reuse props, because I think the first one that comes to mind is the 2 blades that the orange grunts use in Power Rangers SPD, or Deca Ranger is very clearly the Chrono Sabers from Power Rangers Time Force or Time Ranger. So it's not uncommon to repaint and reuse props. So I didn't really think too much of it. And I don't know what episode I eventually, put it together, or the one that prompted me to check up on it. It was pretty late. I think it was like at least halfway into the season I finally decided. So there was one episode where they get like 5 collection pieces, and they're all morphers that are like look like a cell phone. I'm pretty sure I figured it out by that point, and that was like episode 32, 33. So let's just say around the halfway point, I finally thought to check the wiki and see, are they all Power Rangers props? And then so when I looked it up, I'm like, oh, damn, apparently they are. That's fun. That's cute. Obviously, anything that was before the seasons I watched, so Ranger or obviously anything Jetman did before, I would never have picked up on. But majority of them I was able to pick up on. So that was a fun Easter egg. Oh, and apparently their names, and apparently the names of them are, well, they're all in French, but when they're translated to English, they're all song names, and they're actually related to like a type of crime. For instance, the one that I mentioned in French, I never took French, so I'm probably going to botch the pronunciation. La vie sur la voie rapide, and that translates to life in the fast lane. And apparently the name is inspired by the song Life in the Fast Lane by the Eagles, and is a reference to high-speed chases. So apparently each collection piece does that also. So that was also a nice touch. Yeah, I don't know what happened, but every block, like, the budget just increases and they get to experiment more. But at the same time, you also hear things like, oh, viewership is down, there's not as much interest, but they still keep trying to push it and do things like this. Maybe it's because the viewership and stuff is down, but I don't know, I enjoy it. Not the viewership and interest and stuff like that being down, but just the fact that it pushes them to innovate. Even though most of the innovations really come from Kamen Rider first, but I just had to throw this in there because I'm a guy But I really like Tsukasa or Patranger or the Pink Ranger, because not only she's cute, but she's a strong character. She's kind of the cool, like, even-tempered one in the group, but then she has this weakness for like cute stuffed animals, and I think that's kind of me. I mean, I have a little bit of hot-headedness, but I actually kind of like cute stuffed animal things. I feel like it kind of balances out some of my not masculinity, but just a lot of the things I tend to like are kind of guyish. I don't know how to put that, but I like everyone's bonds with each other. I'm not sure if that was a major theme of this season, but everyone has a bond with each other, and I don't think I mentioned it before, but this season is actually centered around two teams, and they're all both on opposite sides. Opposite sides of the law, but in terms of the monsters of the week, they're both against that. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Yeah, kind of. But it's everyone has a bond with each other, and they all kind of do different things with it. So it's like the three and the three, say like the Patrangers and the Lupinrangers, and I like how one side has to keep their identity secret from the other, and I don't know if I even use the right hands for that, but and then they're all friendly as civilians, and the Patrangers don't need to hide their identity because they're basically public servants, and then but the Lupinrangers have to hide their identities because they are on the Patrangers wanted list, and then and they clash when they're all morphed, and but they manage to do something cool where they build those bonds outside of being Rangers, and there are a few times when they actually harden some of those bonds while they're Rangers. I'm probably going to ramble through this one. Like, for instance, even though Yellow and Pink are on opposite teams, they do kind of have a sisterly or even like girl power connection, because they do that classic episode where two characters are stuck together because of the monster of the week, and it just so happened that their civilian forms were in the same place at the same time, and then she had to still maintain her identity, but they kind of had to trust each other so that if either one of them was going to make it. And then they do something fun with where Green and Yellow have a bit of a romance together, and I was definitely rooting for that. And then there's an episode where Yellow shared with Red because she was basically playing wing woman for another girl that liked Patranger Ichigo, or the Red Patranger. Blue kind of had a moment with Patranger and Red when Blue and Yellow were kind of in a disagreement with Lupin Red. So then he's kind of like just friendly with them. And then Blue and Green had a really interesting moment together when they were both being controlled by a monster. Then, when Blue eventually puts together that they're both being controlled, they actually kind of have this understanding, or he actually kind of has this understanding that he knows that when Green finds out, he's not going to like it either. So, Blue takes down the monster as a monster, and then he lets Green take over and destroy the monster as when it's blown up to mech size. So that was like a fun bonding moment, and the fun bonding moment is like when he calls him senpai. because of what happens in the episode. And then with even Blue and Pink have a moment together because they get trapped in an area where they're not supposed to, and they kind of have to trust each other, and he can't morph at all because then they're gonna find out that he's a Lupinranger. But then Pink, being a public servant as a police type, she has to protect him the entire time. And of course Red and Red have a rivalry, but then kind of have almost a brotherly relationship, and that actually feeds a lot into the character of Lupin Red. And I know I just stumbled through all of this, but it's definitely worth a watch. I don't want to say too much, even though I know I spoiled a lot when I talk. I just have to say that ending had me going. It was really emotional. I think I almost teared up at that. But I will say this: no one died. It was a very satisfying ending where they reached their goals, and you're just kind of happy for them, and you're just happy that everything managed to conclude that the way that it did, and it was a really strong ending. And again, it does kind of cover the theme of bonds and relationships, and it was a good ending. I think part of the reason why my current description and as I'm talking through all this is so disorganized is because I didn't lead with the fact that this season is the first season where we have two teams of Super Sentai pitted against each other, as well as a monster villain group. And the reason why I tried to save it for the end is because I want to briefly bring up the Power Rangers hexagon concept. So the Power Rangers hexagon concept this is, I think it's just from the wiki, and I may have watched a video on it, but apparently the Power Rangers hexagon concept was supposed to be the original direction for Power Rangers Ninja Storm, where I think Tommy Oliver, the OG Green Ranger and White Ranger, was going to have his own team of Rangers. He was going to train his own team of Rangers, and then the opposing school was going to be I think I read something like it was going to be the Phantom Ranger, and I don't remember the premise as to why they're pitted against each other, but an additional parameter of it all was they were going to be revisiting familiar locations, collecting important pieces of Power Rangers history, because something like this, mind you, that was in 2002, 2003, so I'm kind of curious why, did they eventually come to it on their own, or did they find out about it and decide to use it, or did they share it? I don't know. It's kind of interesting, which is kind of one of those interesting development stories that you read about. Yeah, in the case of Lupin, I feel like they had the additional budget they could have, or if they made this an anniversary, a major anniversary type of season, they totally could have done something where they revisited some really important places. But then at that point it basically gets into tribute episode territory. But I guess that's why having the props having the collection pieces be old, props was a pretty good idea. And just on the idea of collections, even though it didn't work, even though it wouldn't work the same way that I said, they should have a Go Under Turbo Ranger and Car Ranger crossover, or even the big dinosaur crossovers, I felt like they could have tried to do something with Bulkinger. I don't know, or at least drop a reference or something other than a collection piece. I don't know. That's just me feeding my own ego and my own fantasies and whatnot. So I guess just on to the things that kind of threw me off. I guess one of the things that really threw me off is when you eventually find out that Arsene and Kogure, who is the butler who kind of hired them, and Noel, who is Lupin and Patranger X, the Silver and Gold Ranger, when you find out that they're actually from like another dimension or another world, and that's where the Ganglers or the villain group is from, that kind of threw me off. Yeah, they're from another world or another dimension, but not necessarily an alternate universe, and I don't know. It was just, I was just not expecting it. But I guess that was kind of the point. But still, a few other small things, like it's kind of sad that there was no ending theme or dance, or just the fact that there was no ending theme. Like, even if they didn't have a dance, the fact that there's no ending theme was a little weird. They had like a ending, I don't know if it can be considered an eye catch, but they did have a little ending clip where, you know, everyone's like mechs kind of fly in or drive in together, then, you know, fly out together and fades to black. That's pretty much it. It wasn't bad. It was just, you know, something about the music. It ends it on a nice note. It kind of, you know, you have the opening to bring you into the mood, and then you kind of have the ending to kind of bring you out to the mood, and bring you out of the mood. I think having that was just a little bit too abrupt, but and also some of them are fun and catchy. So, you know, that's kind of sad that they didn't do it. It could be because it's police themed, but they actually make like 2 Beverly Hills Cop references, and you know, I watched those movies and they're pretty fun. Like, when they came out, I'm pretty sure I was too young to watch it, so I eventually watched it at some point when I was a little older, so I know who's involved, what's involved. And it's Eddie Murphy, and you know, he's a typical cop from Detroit who has to solve a case in Beverly Hills. I get that, but then they make references to it in that, you know, they make one, they have like an interrogation scene and they're trying to intimidate the perp. So then they have their police captain, Commander Hilltop, who is black. So seeing a black guy in, you know, Japanese Super Sentai is pretty cool. I mean, it's not the first time, but, you know, the previous guy who made an appearance in Mega Ranger and is the same guy in Ranger, has 2 different roles. He only made like short appearances. This one, Commander Hilltop, was a little bit more regular, so that was pretty cool. But anyway, they reenact, or not reenact, but they have him and their robot, Jim Carter, who is voiced by a very familiar sounding voice actress who voices the character in Gintama. I don't know why I had to mention that, but they have him switch roles. So Jim Carter plays the Beverly Hills Cop. It has the jacket and like a mustache, and then is kind of saying stuff about like Detroit. And then Commander Hilltop is supposed to play Jim Carter, and he's decked out like a robot. I don't know why it was weird. It's fun because I actually know the movie, but it was weird. So there was an episode where I think Patranger Ichigo, or the Red Ranger, kind of forgets who he is because of the monster of the week. So then they're trying to see how far back he can remember, and Commander Hilltop asks, "Do you know who I am?" He's like, "Oh yeah, I think I've seen you before." It's like, "Oh yeah, he remembers Commander Hilltop." Nope, it's because he's seen him in a movie. That movie being Beverly Hills Cop. And I wonder, was it just a really popular movie when it came out, or is that their image of American police movies, or I don't know. It just stood out to me. Anyway, the Lupinrangers subplot storyline focuses on a separate villain who's kind of doing his own thing, but eventually, works with the Ganglers, but only for his own interest. And I feel like there was a noticeable gap in that storyline. Not in terms of how cohesive it is or how much it makes sense, because I'm not good at picking up at that sort of thing. Really just more so like he's brought up in like episode like 12 to 15, and then you don't see him again until like episode 30 something, or you might see him in bits, but you don't really see him like really fleshed out and really in conflict with them until like the episode 35 and on. So just kind of weird, like, because this was the first time I was watching a season as it was running, I thought maybe it was because I had to wait every week for it to watch it, so it was kind of making it longer than I thought it was. But then the second time I did binge watch it, so seeing everything in a short amount of time it's not really an accurate representation either. But it did feel like there was a gap. And speaking of watching it the first and second time, so I just want to know, like, I didn't cram it in December. It was a little bit of December and into January. So just a little side note. At some point it did feel like the story was kind of unbalanced, and it was definitely biased towards the Lupinrangers. So I don't know how much of it was a marketing decision. Like if at some point they figured, oh, people are liking the Lupinrangers more because, of toy sales, so they tried to push it that way, or if just the nature of, thieves and police and the stories and, the motivations just kind of naturally led that way. I don't know. I did feel like on the second time it didn't feel as unbalanced. It still felt unbalanced, but just not as unbalanced. Especially because, when I started to pick up on more things and, kind of focus a little bit more on like the bond and relationship between all the Rangers, especially on the opposing sides, and how they all had these adventures with each other, I think is what kind of balanced it out a little bit more, and really made it more, like gave it more connection, I guess while on the topic of bonds and relationships, which happens to be a common theme amongst Super Sentai or just any shonen media really, is episode or number 42, Time of Battle. So this is an interesting episode because it's pretty late into the season, and Lupinrangers are still maintaining their identity against the Patrangers. But this is like when it really felt like, before their identity is revealed, this is like the last time they really get to, I guess, know each other before the big reveal happens. So this episode really kind of demonstrated their bizarre sense of trust in each other, even though they're adversaries, because they're both Sentai teams, and they're both against the Ganglers, but they both have different motivations, but they both needed each other. And in this one they were, it was against one of the Gangler generals, so the guy was pretty strong. especially because he stole some of their collection pieces, so he was like even more powered up. But they kind of had to use each other, but use might not be the best word, because even though they're adversaries, they built up this sense of trust and respect, and it gets pointed out later on in in the end game arc, and that's why it was so important to have those little moments of random adventures with each other. I mean, some are a little more fleshed out than others. For instance, Red versus Red, and the budding romance between Yellow and Green, and then even just the anytime Yellow and Pink find themselves together. But then even kind of the random ones like Blue and Green, or Red and Blue, or even Red and Yellow, they developed this sense of trust and respect over time, even though one side didn't know who the other one was. And then when they eventually put it together, even they were like, is that why it felt right, even though it shouldn't have? And it's kind of fun because they kind of do a bit of a role reversal from their initial plan. They were each going to use each other as a distraction, or I think because the original plan was Lupinrangers were going to use the Patrangers as a distraction so that they could, steal the collection piece from the safe. But then Patrangers were going to use the Lupinrangers as a distraction to, preoccupy the villain so that they could take it down. Just due to the events and how the fight goes, it was a bit of a role reversal. So it was the Lupinranger who had to serve as the distraction, while it was the Patranger who had to unlock the safe and steal the collection piece. And they even pointed out. So they do something fun where they do have one mecha formation where they combine everybody, both the Lupinrangers and the Patrangers. And then there's a bit of a cockpit mix-up because, one Lupinranger is paired up with another Patranger, and it's kind of fun to see that dynamic, because you don't really see that. You may only see that dynamic once, but it wasn't with everyone. Although I'm kind of curious what it would have been like if they made the cockpit where it held everybody in the same space, because for the big combined mecha combination, everyone's in pairs. So I was kind of curious to see what would happen if they did it all in the same room. So I have to say, on the second time around, it's a year later from when I started my journey, and I was kind of reflecting, like, how it's been already a year when I started, and then just kind of thinking about it, it's like, dang, especially with this episode, because they go wild with the VFX and graphics. It's like a video game finisher, an excess over the top Japanese video game finisher. And it was just like, man, the VFX got really good, especially because shortly after this I would watch Jetman, which is from 1991. So it was kind of weird going back to that after being exposed to so many high VFX seasons. So with this episode, it's kind of the last you really get to see of the Lupinranger versus Patranger dynamic, and where only one side knows the other's identities, because after this it slowly starts to set up for the endgame arc. 2 of them were holiday specials. 2 of them were really focused on Lupin, Patranger X, and that's actually when you find out that he was from a different world. You don't really get to see the Lupinranger versus Patranger dynamic anymore, and this is kind of where it all comes to a T. and then, eventually you have the big identity reveal episode, and from there it just changes even more. So I feel like this is kind of the last you really get to see of the Lupinranger versus Patranger before it becomes Lupinranger and Patranger, if that makes any sense. So I really like the overall growth of the characters and the season and the story development, because I don't know, I tend to like stories where it just grows, and you can kind of look back on it and kind of think about how you can separate, like it's very noticeable how different the beginning is from the end. And something what I mean by that is kind of like I don't know, Avatar: The Last Airbender. Remember when we were traveling before, traveling from place to place, trying to learn before we got thrown into this world, or even something like, Batman. It's like, remember when he used to just take down street thugs and gangs before he got to really crazy villains like the Riddler and the Joker, and that's before he even goes off with the Justice League fighting aliens and at some point essentially becoming a god. I feel like this was an episode that kind of marked the end of that that initial relationship. Not that it was better, not that it was worse. It's kind of interesting to see it that way, and to witness and experience growth. Yeah, I think that's the word I'm thinking of: growth and development. I mean, not that previous seasons haven't done it, but maybe because this is one of the ones that this is the second time watching it, I just kind of picked up on it more. And being the first one I ever watched as it was running, it definitely has a special place in my heart. I picked a pretty good one to start with. I think I did.